This is the Investor Connect podcast program. I'm Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of this show in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, family offices, private equity, and many other investors for early stage and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Donna Hamlin, CEO, and Nola Masterson, partner at Boardwise. Boardwise is dedicated to providing companies and executives with the highest quality solution, tools, education, research, late-breaking news, and advisory support in corporate governance available for governance needs around the globe. They work with all forms of companies and organizations, including private and public corporations and associations, nonprofit organizations and executives, and teams with a passion for better governance practices. Donna, Nola, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
Great. So let's talk about your background before investing in early stage companies. Donna, can you tell us what did you do before this?
Yeah, this is kind of a perfect marriage between Nola and me in that my background was all in strategy and the talent pull off a strategy. So I worked in the management side of things and developed an interest in when things go well, it's because of that combination as opposed to just the wallet that gets invested. Now, if you compare that to Nola, she comes from a different angle.
Yeah, my background is in science. I got a master's degree and was working on a PhD when I decided I was going to be called to corporate life in the area of science. And so I worked for a medical technology company and a early biotech company called Millipore Corporation for 9 years and climbed the corporate ladder into understanding how businesses run, how businesses work by not only carrying the bag, but then being a regional manager and educating other people how to take an order and sell.
Great. That sounds good. So Nola, what excites you right now?
I'm most excited about investing in the femtech space because it's very underserved and it's a hot area. And there's a lot of women that have a lot of wealth, actually, that are putting it toward areas that they want to see products developed. And it's changing the tenor of venture capital a little bit. So that's exciting to me.
Great. And Donna, how about you?
Well, I'm learning as much as I'm helping with some of these new areas where there's underserved markets or opportunities where there just hasn't been enough focus on investment. And we are working together to discover it's not just femtech health, but it could also be aging and longevity or diversity markets, categories that just haven't gotten their investment strategy accessible to them. And the more we look at those things, we're learning a lot about the innovations, which is really exciting to me when you're helping as much as you're learning.
Well, great. Well, let's talk about your advice for startups and investors. Let's start with you, Nola. What's your advice for people investing in startups? What do you tell them to do before they write that check?
Well, most of the time, it's not an individual writing a check. You go with a group of people that are going to vet the deal for you and do the homework and the due diligence. And you should do that because individual investing in startup is very, very risky. There's been more money lost that way than there has been money made. And I came up through venture capital myself, working with early firms like Kleiner Perkins and Oak Investment Partners, and then joined as a venture partner with the company called TVM Capital. So I believe in the venture capital model, and I'm working with a fund called Femtech, which is out of Portfolio venture capital firm now. So I think it's better to go with people that will help you make that investment succeed because it's always risk capital when you talk about venture.
That's right. And Donna, how about you?
Well, I tend to do a lot of homework on early stage companies that I have been doing consulting with. And if I find one that feels right and it's making a difference in the world, that's my interest. Now, I'm also an investor with the Portfolio Fund, and we're now doing some work with Harmonics, which is another investment fund, looking at life sciences and technology, which are hot topics to look at. And if there's something that comes up that's, interesting, but not really impactful, then it's probably not for me. And, Nola's done so much due diligence in her past that we've kind of got a formula now that she picks the racehorses and then we make them successful.
Great. And then on the other side of that table, what's your advice for people running startups? What do you tell them to do before they go out to raise funding? Nola, what's your answer for that?
Well, they should get a team together that you can believe in, because it's always a management team that makes a company succeed, not just one individual. And you want to make sure that that team operates well and at highest purpose for what they're doing. And I think the best people make the best investments. So I think you should talk take in as much money as you can when you're beginning an early stage investment, because it really isn't, you don't want to have to keep going back to the well. So people running startups should find deep pockets if they can.
Great. And Donna?
Yeah, our formula really is make sure that you're getting the right kind of capital from a group that understands more than just the wallet, also the wisdom around the table to make it so. And so we do a lot of due diligence to make sure that when there's an investment to be made, that they have the right talent in the management team to pull this off, as well as the surround sound advice of good board directors and advisors. Because we know from our research that if that's done early, the acceleration rate of success for the business is much faster. And why waste your time struggling with a round and another round and another round when you can go faster, better? And that's sort of the organizational principle that we're operating from.
Good. That's good advice. Well, let's talk about the state of early stage investing. How do you guys see the industry evolving? Nola, what do you think is the evolution coming up here in venture capital funding?
Well, it's only growing. Entrepreneurship is global now. So there's global opportunities to invest, and the entrepreneur is really making the innovations and technologies for tomorrow. So it is the hope of every country to have their entrepreneurs pull them out of whatever recession they've come into because of COVID. And at Portfolio, our focus is underrepresented people, such as women, in the venture capital space. And that's estimated to be $50 billion by 2025. So that's a growing market.
Great. And Donna, how do you see this industry evolving?
Well, I'm going to be curious to see what happens in the next decade, because I'm noticing from an academic standpoint, I've been a teacher of entrepreneurship for many, many years, that the education format is getting into earlier students in their early college years to even look at this as a principle. And even my daughter is 20 years old and just in college is asking me for advice on investments, like she hasn't much money to do it with, but she's already being educated to think about that. I didn't do that until I was much later, past my college years. So there's an infrastructure that's being built and socialized, which I think is going to change the direction of where investments might go. Because the creativity of the younger people looking at technology in a different way than we did is going to open up new opportunities.
Right. And Donna, what do you think is the biggest change we're going to see in, say, the next 5 years? What new things are going to happen here based on post-COVID and other trends going on?
Well, the new opportunities that people are looking at are in technology a lot, because we don't know what we can't do yet in technology. And these new AI principles or formulas for building platforms are pretty interesting. I'm not an expert in that area, but I'm very curious as to the direction of some of that, with the caution that AI is stupid sometimes, and you have to be careful that you're investing in something that's reliable, not biased, if you will.
All right. And Noah, what's your prognostication for the next 5 years? What do you think is the biggest change we'll see coming up?
Technology is going to impact everything. The Internet of Things is going to happen. We're going to see a lot of telehealth coming online thanks to COVID, and a lot of connected investors and connected in entrepreneurs being able to find each other across the globe. Because what we found is, without having meetings this past year, you can still get money. You can still start a business. You can still take your idea to an investor. So that kind of opens up the door, to people with a good idea being able to find an investor and make it happen globally. And so although we might see some fractionation in the global economy because of disruption in infrastructure and the ability to get goods, that's not going to stop the startup phenomena that's already happening. I think it's only going to increase. And what we saw after the pandemic of 1918 was the roaring 20s. So to take 2 years out of your life from 2020 to 2022 and then have the door open, I think it's going to be Katie bar the door. There's going to be a lot of excitement for what's ever new and how to make that happen. And I think people are really anxious to create a new future, not based on the past.
Another trend that I'm noticing due to COVID is that people who otherwise would go look at a product or a service through their doctor, for example, couldn't go see their doctor. And so they just took the risk on themselves to try it by going online and buying. So we have an investment in a company that's doing virtual reality systems to manage nerve pain, which means you don't have to take opioids or any drugs anymore. You can just use this. And they were selling it through doctors. And then when COVID happened, they stopped and sold it direct to consumer, and they started picking up people who are willing to try, even if they don't have the courtesy of the recommendation from the doctor. And that's changing our risk appetite, I think, as users, which is an interesting thing for something like medicine in a new format. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, the tools are getting easier to use. The web is becoming more pervasive, and so more and more the user can take care of themselves. And so it's a great time to be alive is when we go into this, I guess, the next roaring 20s. You think we're going to have another roaring 20s like we did 100 years ago?
Oh, I do. I absolutely do.
I agree. I think there's pent-up demand. There's a whole new set of careabouts here, and it's people are ready for the next thing, and we're going to come out of the gate strong here at the end of this year and next for sure. Well, let's talk about your investment thesis. Tell us more about what is it and what's your criteria for looking at deals. Nola, what do you guys invest in?
Well, out of the Femtech Fund, which portfolio is still raising, so you can still get into it if you want. Our investment thesis is products for women from early stage of birth and labor and delivery all the way through menopause, and looking at areas where women are particularly sensitive, whether it be heart disease, chronic pain, where they're not being served well by the average community, and areas where technology can make an impact in women's health. So what we're finding is that the connected consumer, which is usually a woman, is using their data for their own health benefits now more than ever. So this is whether it is a continuous glucose monitor for a diabetic, where everybody in the family can see if the diabetic is hitting a low point or a high point. This is really where we're going. The data analysis is becoming the new oil for the future. And data analysis is being adopted by women. And they want to see it in the areas where they have been underserved: endometriosis, uterine fibroids, women's issues, cancer, ovarian cancer. There's not a good screen for that yet. Breast cancer. These are all areas that women are concerned about. And heart disease. The heart attack for a woman looks a lot different than heart attack for a man, and they're not being treated well for their particular brand of heart disease. So we're looking, our investment thesis is if it can help a woman, we will look at it.
Donna, what's your take there?
Yeah, in addition to that category, I think the social impact opportunities are of interest. For example, Daily Pay is a company that we've invested in, and it creates a way for employees to draw down their earned income independent of waiting for their paycheck, which has had a huge social impact on their access to capital, pay their bills on time and not be pinged to death with penalties and what have you, for a group of people who are working really hard and every penny matters. And that's a social change that's dramatic, especially during a time like this where income is uncertain for many people. So any opportunities that fall in that category are of interest to us as well.
Great. And Donna, can you talk about a portfolio that perhaps fits that thesis?
Well, we are talking together with 3 different groups that have common interest in those categories. Now, they cross different technologies versus life sciences and what have you, but I'm finding that working together by comparing interests of portfolios with other groups makes us stronger.
And Nola, any startups that you like to call out that fit that thesis?
Well, and we do have an investment in Prime Genomics, which is a company that's analyzing saliva when a woman goes to get her regular mammogram for biomarkers that might indicate cancer at the earliest stage before you get a sizable thing that can be seen on a mammogram. We're also looking at pelvic floor problems and things that would prevent bone loss in women at menopause. We're looking at things that will help do telemedicine for women and families. We invested in a company called Maven, a Series C round, which delivers the telehealth doctor for about $18, which is less than a copay would be if you went in to see your doctor. And we're getting a lot of traction with making health visits easier for families and women, and it's getting reimbursed. We're also looking at some of the new things from menstruation products and fertility and women wanting to have birth options. So these are all areas that would fit into our investment.
Great. Well, let's talk about the challenges you see your startups and investors facing today. Nola, what are the challenges in the space for the startup that you deal with?
Startups in general are always challenged by getting the right people and enough money to prove their thesis. So I always quote Vinod Khosla, who said, I don't know what I'm investing in until 5 years after I've made the investment. But it's always the management team that makes the difference. So it's not the horse, it's the jockeys that we try and bet on. And that's always a growth opportunity for people in general, because how do you fit a CEO role if you've never been a CEO? And how do you hire the very, very best people for a startup? What are the challenges for a startup are in COVID times? People couldn't get together. So they even at Google, it's hard to run a team when you can't see the team, when you're not together. So that's the big challenge now is how do we come out of COVID and develop teams that are really effective?
Donna, what's your take?
Well, we talked to an awful lot of the first-time CEOs. And one of the things they ask a lot for is help finding the right talent, because if they choose from their own social networks or their friendship or their loyalties of people that they've trusted in the past, it's not the best judgment. And the other is asking for coaching themselves, because a lot of times as a first-time CEO, they don't know how to leverage the assets of a board or get advisors, and they need help. And that's what we're trying to do, is bring that wisdom to them so that they can make good decisions earlier, as opposed to the school of hard knocks where it hurts for a while and then they have to make a different decision.
Well, great. And then for the investor side, Donna, what do you think is the challenge the investors face today?
Oh, so many opportunities and so little time.
There are a lot of them.
There's a lot of things to look at, and to stay focused on what you really care about is a discipline. And so that's one task. And the other is to put enough time in to really do the due diligence well, and to create some sense of harmony around the intent of a group that's going to go at this together. I'm on a board right now of a company that's adding a new board director from a D round. And the cohesion of the group prior to this has been really high. And so there's a lot of skittishness right now about who's this new person and what's it going to feel like. So finding out time to really marry what you need against where the money's coming from, so that you don't have somebody there for the wrong reason, is important.
Right. And Nola, what's your take on that?
Challenge in this space for investors is, number one, we see about 100 companies for the one that we invest in. So making time to find the right investment. And then once you've made that investment, the big challenge is getting other people to invest with you. Finding a syndication that can go the distance for the A, the B, the C round, the D round. And because no one fund wants to do all of the funding as the company grows. So at Portfolio, I'm particularly interested in finding syndicate partners that will go into some of the deals that we've already done and will show us deals that they have that they're interested in having us syndicate with them. So I think syndication is the name of the game.
Great. Well, you guys see a lot of sectors and applications out there. If you had to pick one or two that you think are good immediate opportunities for investors to pursue today, what would you put at the top of the list? Donna, what would you call out as number 1 and 2 opportunities there?
Anything in the life sciences, I think, is important. And the burgeoning number of things that fall under that category make subcategories too. Med devices is one, and life science education and information access is another. They're all interesting and they're all powerful.
Great. And Nola?
Well, as I said before, I'm kind of married to the femtech space right now, so that is my favorite space, and so it's what I'm looking at every day. And I'm really encouraged to see that there's a little bit more money coming into it, but there's a disparity, Hal, with women when you start to look at race. And we at Portfolio also have a fund for Black, Latino, and LGBTQ, because it's really almost criminal in the United States that we have doubled the rate of maternal and fetal deaths from 1994 to 2014, especially amongst non-white women. And that to me is untenable. So we really need to address the problem of disparity of race and disparity of sex. Just to give you an example, it wasn't until 1994 that they mandated that women be part of clinical trials for drugs. Up until that time, they couldn't even use female mice in the preclinical studies because they menstruated. Something about that culture has got to change because half of the population menstruates. And that has to be built in to the research underlying the life sciences. So I'm sitting with a bunch of NIH people saying, how can we change that culture? Because it's not about maintaining fertility. It's about actually getting fertile women into clinical trials for subjects and Black, Latino, and LGBTQ. We have to get more diverse. We can't just use white men anymore in life sciences.
Very good. Well, the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't? Nola, anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, I really encourage people to come together with us at Portfolio and join us in this adventure. Our next fund, besides the Femtech Fund, will be an ag and biotech fund, and we're open especially to women investors because we are excited about having women put some of their capital into the venture scene. We don't think that's been something that they thought they could do, and we actually teach them as they do it. So it's really we're very eco-friendly, as you might think, to have anybody that wants to come in and learn by doing.
Great. And Donna?
Well, one of the features that we're emphasizing is if you're going to be an investor, also think about how you can contribute with your problem-solving skills or your orientation or your expertise. We've built out a registry so that people who are investors or people who just would like to help can understand where their highest and best use is. And if there is an advisory need or a board director need that's not in conflict with an investment, we can match that talent to a company CEO that's needing that talent. And there's much more value when you're working at that level in a strategic way, in addition to just writing a check. So we're trying to encourage that it's wisdom and wallet together that's going to make a big difference in the capacity and the success of an early stage company as it blooms.
Well, great. Well, how best for listeners to get back in touch with you? Nola, what's the best way there?
You can reach me at Masterson at sciencefuturesinc.com. Can be reached at nola.masterson@boardwise.biz or through portfolio.com.
And Donna?
And you can actually reach Nola at Boardwise as well as me at donna.hamlin@boardwise.biz.
Great. We'll include those in the show notes and want to thank you guys for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Halti Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for the basis of investment decisions.